connect a region of over 600 bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. China vows zero tolerance for separatist activities in Taiwan and reaffirmed that it would take the self-ruled island by force if necessary. China's Taiwan Affairs Office issued a white paper laying out how it intends to claim the island through a range of economic incentives and military pressure. While Singapore has weathered the test of the pandemic, the Prime Minister warned that the road ahead will not be easy and Singaporeans have to stand united. The Philippines' economic growth slowed in the second quarter, according to officials, as they warned that surging inflation and the pandemic would weigh on the outlook for the rest of the year. The Philippines is now in talks with other member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations for the procurement of vaccines against monkeypox. First in our news, focusing on sectors severely scarred by the pandemic will make the country's GDP growth more sustainable. That is according to the National Economic and Development Authority and local economists. On Tuesday, the Philippine Statistics Authority reported that the economy posted a growth of 7.4% in the second quarter, but they also warned that surging inflation and the coronavirus pandemic would weigh on the outlook for the rest of the year. Here's National Statistician Dennis Mapa and Economic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan.
Ang Gross Domestic Product o GDP ng Pilipinas ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 7.4% sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay panglimang consecutive quarter na paglago ng ekonomiya mula sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2021.
Our country's recovery from its most significant economic and health challenge remains strong due to improved risk management as more social and economic activities have been allowed. For the remainder of the year, we must apply the same or even better risk management protocols and protect the most vulnerable against high inflation and other shocks. The full reopening of the economy will indeed generate more income-earning opportunities, but the purchasing power of that income may be eroded by the high inflation, primarily resulting from increased fuel and food costs. Consequently, the government is focused on ensuring food security and reducing transport, logistics, and energy costs. The Department of Budget and Management has recently approved the release of the second tranche of the Targeted Cash Transfer Program, which amounts to 4.1 billion pesos and will benefit about 4 million Filipino families. The distribution of targeted subsidies for PUJ drivers and operators, including tricycle drivers, and fuel discounts to farmers and fisher folk will help cushion the impact of elevated oil prices on vulnerable groups. While the manufacturing sector's growth decelerated to 2.1% in the second quarter, down from 22.4% in the same quarter last year. The slowdown was due to weaker growth in computers, electronics and optical products, chemical products, and food products. The slowdown may be due to inflationary pressures brought about by the Russia-Ukraine war, weakening global demand, and supply chain disruptions brought by lockdowns in China.
Inflation spiked to a near four-year high of 6.4% in June, and the central bank has raised interest rates for 3 straight months to temper prices. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or PCCI, earlier told Business Mirror that many businesses are struggling to cope with the high cost of raw materials caused by supply chain disruptions, preventing them from opening more job opportunities for Filipinos. The National Economic and Development Authority assured that the country's economy will eventually recover after being badly hit by the pandemic. Balisacan said the performance of sectors such as transport, accommodation, food service, and other services have shown slow but steady signs of recovery back to pre-pandemic levels. He also said the government will provide support through lower input costs, access to new farming technologies, financial assistance to farmers, and strengthening of the agricultural value chain. Mr. Balisacan also noted that the services sector, which has been hit hard by the pandemic-induced restrictions, is also on its way to a full recovery. And Singapore is marking its 57th year of independence, the National Day Parade this year. And it will also celebrate all Singaporeans who have helped weather the COVID-19 storm. Here's Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, and he warns that Singaporeans also have to be prepared that the region may not be as peaceful and stable as it has been so far. Let's listen in.
My fellow Singaporeans, we have battled COVID-19 for 2.5 years now. After many ups and downs, we've come through as one united people. We are now in a much better position. Our population is highly vaccinated and well protected. Our road ahead will not be easy. Around us, a storm is gathering. US-China relations are worsening, with intractable issues, deep suspicions, and limited engagement between them. This is unlikely to improve anytime soon. Furthermore, miscalculations or mishaps can easily make things much worse. Russia's invasion of Ukraine also has profound implications for the world and for Singapore. First, it has set Russia, a nuclear power, bitterly against many states, especially the US and the NATO countries. The hostility is deep and will not be resolved easily. Second, the invasion violates fundamental principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Third, war in Europe will affect regional security in the Asia-Pacific. Already, it has further strained China's relations with the US and with America's partners in Asia. Singapore will be buffeted by intense rivalry and tensions in the region around us. What can we do about this? Staying united is key to Singapore's survival. It's the only way to deal with challenges in an increasingly troubled world. We must also brace ourselves and be psychologically prepared that in the next decades, our region may not be as peaceful and stable as it has been thus far. More immediate, however, are the economic challenges. Even though our economy has emerged strongly from the pandemic, the outlook has clouded considerably. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, the pandemic had already disrupted supply chains, and inflation was already rising. But the invasion has aggravated both problems.
Now, last week, U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, prompting Beijing to hold live-fire drills in waters around the self-ruled island. China has announced that it is halting cooperation with the U.S. in a number of areas, including dialogue between senior-level military commanders and climate talks in retaliation for that visit. Mr. Lee urged Singaporeans to look to the long term, pointing out how Gardens by the Bay was decades in the making and that the land he was standing on to deliver the National Day message was reclaimed decades ago as part of Singapore's plan to create a new downtown with a landmark green public space. Mr. Lee said the fourth generation on leaders of Singapore have launched the Forward Singapore exercise to involve Singaporeans in refreshing the nation's social compact and chart the way forward. He invited citizens to participate actively and contribute their ideas. He also said while Singapore has weathered the test of the COVID-19 pandemic, the road ahead will not be easy and Singaporeans have to stand united. He said on inflation, he gave the assurance that the government is doing everything necessary to help people cope with the rising prices. Let's listen in.
The government also stands ready to do more to help Singaporeans if things worsen. But the basic reality is that international economic conditions have shifted. The world is not likely to return anytime soon to the low inflation levels and interest rates that we have enjoyed in recent decades. Singapore's deeper response to this shift must be to transform our industry, upgrade our skills, and raise our productivity. Then our wages can go up higher than inflation, and Singaporeans can earn more in real terms, year by year. COVID will not be Singapore's last crisis. More storms and turbulence lie ahead. But do not fear. As long as we stay united and resolute, we can keep our nation peaceful and secure.
Update on the China-Taiwan conflict. Now, China today reaffirmed its threat to use military force to bring self-governing Taiwan under its control. China vowed zero tolerance for separatist activities in Taiwan, and they reaffirmed that it would take the self-ruled island by force if necessary. Let's take a look.
China has used the drills in its military playbook to prepare for the invasion of Taiwan. It is conducting large-scale military exercises and missile launches, as well as cyber attacks, disinformation campaign, and economic coercion in an attempt to weaken public morale in Taiwan.
The so-called foreign minister, as you mentioned, is just the head of a foreign affairs department of China's region. China's countermeasures against Pelosi's visit is legitimate, lawful, and proportionate. It's a warning to the provocateur and the Taiwan independence forces. There is but one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. This is the true fact and status in the Taiwan Strait. Certain Taiwan independence elements have tried to mislead the public by mischaracterizing the facts. This again exposes their nature of seeking independence. I shall say that the reunification of our motherland is the shared aspiration of all Chinese, and this is an unstoppable historical trend. No matter what card the DPP authorities and Taiwan independence forces try to play.
Now, China's Taiwan Affairs Office on Wednesday issued a white paper. It laid out how it intends to claim the island through a range of economic incentives and military pressure. China last issued a white paper on Taiwan in 2000. The Chinese white paper promised Taiwan economic prosperity as well as greater security and dignity after reunification. But that offer comes in the shadow of this biggest military exercises China has conducted around the island, including training for a blockade. The drills have raised fears that China's communist leadership could be preparing for an invasion. Since the late 1990s, the island has transformed from an autocracy into a vibrant democracy, and a distinct Taiwanese identity has emerged. And tonight's other news, the Philippines is now in talks with other member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, for the procurement of vaccines against monkeypox. Now, DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire said the Food and Drug Administration has already identified 3 manufacturers of the monkeypox vaccine.
And as I said last week, initially, ang kanilang sagot, wala pa kung nabubuong mekanismo ang US government for donations because they still also need their stocks of monkeypox vaccines. Also, nakipag-ugnayan tayo sa ating ASEAN member states. O, yung ASEAN member states, kasama tayo dito, 10 ito, dahil pinag-uusapan na po at that level ng international membership yung ASEAN procurement of monkeypox vaccine. So it's not just going to be the country, we will be joining the ASEAN states if and when this plan will push through. Ang pangatlo po, nakapag-identify na po ang ating Food and Drug Administration ng DOH ng 3 pang manufacturers for this monkeypox vaccine. So ito po ang tinitignan natin na ngayon kung paano tayo papasok sa ganitong procurement and also identifying sources of funds.
Earlier, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. allayed fears of Filipinos on monkeypox, saying it's not as infectious as COVID-19. A surge in monkeypox infections has been reported since May outside the West and Central African countries where the disease has long been endemic. The first symptoms include fever, headaches, sharp muscle pains, fatigue, a rash, as well as swollen and painful lymph nodes. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. Health announced that beginning August 5, the 3 D.C. Health monkeypox clinics will begin offering limited walk-up vaccinations for eligible residents, pending vaccine availability. The U.S. has so far delivered some 600,000 Genius vaccine, origin ally developed against monkeypox's-related virus, smallpox. But this number figure is still far short of the approximately 1.6 million people considered at highest risk and who need the vaccine most. Rosel Feria from Washington, D.C. Bureau reports.
Washington, D.C. announces that the 3 D.C. Health monkeypox clinics will begin offering limited walk-up vaccinations for eligible residents on Fridays pending vaccine availability. These walk-up appointments aim to increase vaccine access to individuals who may not have the ability or technology to pre-register online. The walk-up opportunity is also for those who may not feel comfortable providing their eligibility information online. DC Health, however, stresses that whether online or in person, monkeypox-related information, including eligibility information, is confidential. With each site having 300 doses available per day, wait times may vary depending on demand.
To date, we've made more than 1.1 million vaccine doses available throughout the country, and we've delivered more than 620,000 of those doses. We've also deployed more than 15,000 courses of the TPOXX treatment and have increased the country's capacity to administer tests on a weekly basis to some 80,000.
Today, the FDA has issued an emergency use authorization, or EUA, allowing healthcare providers to use an alternative dosing regimen of the Genius vaccine. This will increase the total number of doses available for use by up to 5-fold. The EUA also allows for use of the vaccine in individuals younger than 18 years of age.
As Dr. Califf described, this strategy would change the method of administration for the Genius vaccine from subcutaneous to intradermal to allow vaccine providers to use an existing 1-dose vial of the vaccine to administer a total of up to 5 separate doses.
Walk-up vaccinations will be available from noon until 8 p.m. or while supply lasts at the DC Health monkeypox vaccination clinics. For locations and vaccine eligibility requirements, go to preventmonkeypox.dc.gov. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The Department of Disease Control in Thailand said monitoring of coronavirus mutations will remain unchanged when the disease is downgraded to communicable under surveillance status from October 1st. According to the Bangkok Post, from October 1, COVID-19 will be placed 57th on the ministry's list of communicable diseases under surveillance, which also includes dengue fever that require an immediate report be made to the ministry. A respiratory disease expert, meanwhile, Official reasoned that the ministry's move to brand COVID-19 as a communicable disease under surveillance instead of declaring it an endemic disease as initially planned. Dr. Opas Karnkawimpong, Director General of the DDC, said that in Thailand, diseases are currently grouped into three broad categories for disease control, namely general diseases, dangerous communicable diseases, and communicable diseases under surveillance. The ministry is considering packaging COVID-19 shots alongside standard annual flu vaccinations and further cutting the isolation period, while ongoing assessment will inform further decisions. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. And an update on the floods in South Korea. At least 9 people now were killed, 7 others missing in South Korea after record downpours flooded major roads, metro stations, and homes.
피해로 좀 당황스럽고요. 좀 11년 전에도 이런 피해가 있었는데 대책을 못 세운 것 같아서 좀 안타깝습니다.
Now, the rain that began on Monday is the heaviest since South Korea's weather observations began 115 years ago, according to President Yoon Suk-yeol, who apologized for the inconvenience. Images shared on social media earlier this week showed people wading through waist-deep water and overflowing metro stations. Seoul's posh Gangnam district was particularly hard hit, with cars left half submerged. Among the 9 victims, 3 died while trapped in their flooded semi-basement apartment known as a banjiha, according to the ministry. Local reports say the victims were a teenager, her mother, and her aunt. Another victim died while removing a tree that had fallen onto a sidewalk and is believed to have been electrocuted. Another died after a landslide buried his home in the mountainous Gangwon province. President Yoon, who on Tuesday visited the banjiha apartment, acknowledged South Koreans have suffered a lot of damage. At a separate government meeting, he told officials to pay special attention to the most vulnerable. Authorities warned of more rains to come, even as emergency workers tried to clear the hulks of flooded cars. In other news, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen canceled a controversial satellite city development around a wildlife sanctuary and zoo near the capital following growing online appeals to halt the project. Conservationists and locals began voicing their concerns and objections when the development plan around the Nom Tamao Zoo and Wildlife Rescue Center came to light several months ago. Take a look. Now, developers last week started razing privatized areas around the more than 2,000-hectare Nom Tamao forest area, an hour drive from capital Phnom Penh and home to many rare and endangered wildlife, including sambar deer at the zoo. Officials defended the development, saying the area's land was too sandy for trees and wild pigs destroyed farmers' crops. But on Sunday morning, strongman Prime Minister Hun Sen ordered the project stopped and thanked compatriots for their constructive comments and requests to conserve the forest around the Nom Tamao Zoo. The Prime Minister said that the forest around the zoo must be preserved, ordering the companies to replant trees on dozens of hectares of land they have already cleared. Now, many of us have just experienced one of the 3 warmest Julys on record. That is according to the UN, World Meteorological Organization, or WMO. According to the WMO, temperatures were close to 0.4 degrees Celsius above the 1991 to 2020 average across much of Europe, with southwestern and western Europe being the most above average regions because of an intense heat wave around mid-July. Let's listen in.
The world just had one of the 3 warmest Julys on record. And obviously, as we all know, there was a very prolonged, very intense heat wave affecting parts of Europe. And this is despite the fact that we have a weak La Nina event. In theory, La Nina events are meant to have a cooling influence, which we did see in parts of the world, but not. Antarctic sea ice in July was the lowest July level on record. Antarctic sea ice in June was the lowest June level on record. Arctic sea ice was the 12th lowest on record according to the Copernicus figures. And as we are seeing in Switzerland, as we're seeing in France, many parts of Germany, northern Italy, southern parts of the United Kingdom, it's dry. July is very, very dry. August is continuing that, the start of August is continuing that trend. Large parts of North America, large regions of South America, also very, very dry in July. And as I said, this pattern is continuing as we sit here, as we can feel. There's a strong high pressure system sitting very close to the United Kingdom at the moment. So this effectively is blocking sort of cooler, moister air coming in from the Atlantic. Temperatures in France this week well above average. In Switzerland, many parts of Switzerland well above average. And as I said, continuing the trend that we saw in July. Spain saw its hottest ever month in July. So not just the hottest July, it was the hottest ever month on record. And so the average temperature for the contiguous US was the third warmest on record. Quite big differences within the US. Texas had its warmest July on record, had its warmest May to July on record, and indeed its warmest April to July on record. And as the WMO Secretary General Petri Talis told you, sitting in this room a few weeks ago, this kind of heat wave is the new normal.
Finally, in our news, a pedestrian crossing turned viral catwalk has become a site for Jakarta's young fashionistas to express themselves while attracting the disapproval of police in the traffic-clogged Indonesian capital. Take a look.
Ya, sedikit itu sih, maksudnya kayak ngeliat orang kayak outfitnya lebih keren, tapi ya udah, kita mah apa adanya.
Now, with their poses, makeups, and struts all being shared on TikTok and Instagram, some Citiam pioneers have found instant fame, earning modeling jobs, endorsements, and an army of adoring fans. The outfits on display have begun to draw crowds, with news of the phenomenon spreading by word of mouth in the megacity of 30 million people. Police, who previously moved to ban the use of the catwalk as a runway, now regularly shout through a loudspeaker toward the crowd of the street. But that doesn't deter girls who don wide-legged jeans, colorful sunglasses, and boys in leather jackets, stylish sneakers, and fur coats from filming their struts for social media. Some of the more enthusiastic teenagers have been caught sleeping on the area's sidewalks at night after missing the last train home. For many, the booming street fashion scene has also become an affordable arena for fashionable experimentation set against the backdrop of the city's most affluent district. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations and beyond. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. Stay in the news. I'm Alma Angela. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.